Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome back to another episode of our Building Blocks Quilt Along. We are going to be free motion quilting one of our 4 patch blocks today with a design I call Wiggly U-shapes. And these Wiggly U-shapes are basically kind of a basic building block, I consider them. We do so much of this kind of wiggly, swirly, curvy lines, all of that kind of stuff. Really can be broken down into the most simplistic way into Wiggly U-shapes. And so I think this is a really important design to learn. And we're going to learn how to stitch it by quilting over one of our 4 patch blocks. So we've got a little bit of prep to do, so let's get started seeing what we have to do to our blocks before we start free motion quilting. So here's one of our blocks right after it's been pieced, and what you're going to want to do is print out the quilting guide. You're going to want the first quilting guide for our block number 1, our 4 patch block, and you can find this guide in the Building Blocks quilt pattern, which is available at leahday.com. So this is what your block looked like pieced, but this is not how it's going to look quilted. We've got a little bit of prep to do. So here's a block that's ready to go. First thing I've done is I've marked a square around the inside, so that way I have pretty much a 1-inch section to hang on to while I'm free motion quilting. Another thing I've done is I've used this guide to actually mark all of my quilting lines, and I've done this for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of plan out my pathway and figure out exactly where I'm going and what I'm doing by having those marked lines. The other reason that I have marked this block is because it is easier for beginners to learn with marked lines. Having taught my husband Josh how to free motion quilt over the last few months, I've definitely seen free motion quilting from a beginner's perspective, and I really want to help you out if this is your very first free motion quilted quilt. So do yourself a favor, take the full-size quilting guide, tape it on a sunny window or a light box, place your pieced block on top of that, and mark the lines using a fabric marking pencil. I use the Fons and Porter marking pencil because I find that it has a nice bold white line, but it definitely comes out. I can erase it after I've quilted my quilt, so I'm not going to worry about those marks showing up after I finish quilting. So get your block marked, and also you want to baste it. Here is my block. I have basted it, and that is meaning to layer it with 3 layers. I've got my top, my batting, which is the puffy layer that makes it warm, and I've got my backing. And I have secured these layers together with straight pens and pen moors. These are pen anchors which allow you to baste really, really easily, and these come out easily while we're free motion quilting. So I've got the block on the machine, and the very first thing I want to do is bring up my bobbin thread. So I'm going to drop the needle down and bring it all the way up, and I want to make sure that needle comes all the way up and almost to the point where it's coming back down again. I give that top thread a tug, and that brings up a loop, and that loop is my bobbin thread. So take both of those threads and just tuck them under your foot. They're out of your way. And we're going to get started first with stitching in the ditch. And basically what that means is stitching right in this ditch where one block was connected to another block. And this is one of those things a lot of people do with a walking foot. I personally like to do this in free motion because I can get to the center right here, and then I can wiggle off and start doing my filler. This is called filling, where I'm whether I'm stitching on a line or I'm stitching this freehand without marks. This is filling because I'm filling in this space in the block. This is ditching, where I'm stitching in the ditch between 2 piece sections. And I really like to ditch and fill at the same time. I think it saves us time. We don't have to go and change feet and break thread and mess with all that. As far as tips for stitching in the ditch and staying right in your ditch, bring your hands just a little closer to the needle and make sure that this hand is in a straight line. It's parallel with your foot, and that's going to help you just kind of push the block straight in. Also, run your machine at a little slower speed, and that might help too. So I'm going to stitch straight down through this stitch, and then I'm going to stitch all around this outline of the block, and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to start stitching these Wiggly U-shapes. So now that I've stitched all of these lines in the ditch, I can take out these pens. And the nice thing is I haven't even broken thread. I have stitched all of these lines and now I'm right here and I'm ready to start filling this block with these wiggly U shapes. And here's another thing to keep in mind, even if you stitch off your added the ditch a little bit, don't obsess about it. Don't rip that out. Just leave it. The more you stitch in the ditch and the more you leave it, you get more practice rather than picking up your seam ripper, the better you're going to get. But picking up your seam ripper to rip something small like that out is really a waste of your time. Okay, so I've stitched down here, and I basically just want to show you, forming this design is exactly our goal this month. We just want to learn how to swing out, and you hear me, I kind of put my foot down with that, and you might need to put your foot down too, because this is one of those shapes that is really easy for our hands to move. It's a motion that feels fairly natural, and it feels fairly natural to me, which is why I increase my speed so drastically. I really like to make that movement. And so if you find yourself making that movement very quickly with your hands, you also want to compensate by increasing the speed of your machine. That means putting your foot down. So after you finish one little row, all you're going to do is travel stitch on that outer line. Now if you ended up on the opposite side, you ended up over here, just travel stitch along this stitched in the ditch line. Either way, just travel stitch back down, and that's just stitching right on top of that other stitching. That helps us avoid a thread break. Okay? And feel free to rotate your block around. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rotate it around and stitch this U. And again, if you find yourself moving really fast, let me move really fast. You see how my stitches get bigger? You want to put your foot down and increase your speed so that way your stitches stay the same consistent size. So there I reached the center, and from here I can stitch this row and fill in this blue square. Then from there I can move on to this square and this square. So this block's going to be knocked out really simple with these cute wiggly U shapes. So that's it for this video. I really hope that you've enjoyed learning this cool quilting design. Wiggly U shapes, it was the very first thing I learned when I was free motion quilting. And you can hear it's one of those things that I can stitch really fast. And you might find, watching this, you might find that your hands speed up just naturally because it's kind of one of those smooth motions. You want to make sure to put your foot down so your stitches don't get too big. So that way you increase the speed of your machine to stay in balance with your hands. So my name is Leah Day, and this has been a video for the Building Blocks Quilt Along. Pick up your downloadable copy of the Building Blocks Quilt Pattern at leahday.com and join us as we quilt along together through all of 2014. Until next time, let's go quilt.